Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and our next guest is Phil Magness. He's a historian and the author of a brand new book, The 1619th Project Myth. Phil, welcome back to the program.
No, thanks for having me.
So, Phil, we talk to you occasionally because you were so good as an economic historian and explaining taxes and tariffs and things like that. But you've got this new book, and it's about this 1619 project. And you wrote this about it in the National Review. You wrote, its scholarly claims have faltered, yet its reputation has thrived in the universities because academic elites set aside their own expertise to promote its political narrative. So this is a 1619 project. It was launched about 6 years ago by the New York Times. What's your beef with it?
Well, unfortunately, when they launched it, they did not do their homework in terms of checking the scholarship of the claims. Ostensibly, it was an exploration of the role of slavery and its legacy across American history, but they adopted some very fringe theories. So, two in particular that were claimed by Nicole Hannah-Jones, the editor of the 1619 Project. She said, first off, that the American Revolution in 1776 is primarily like this defensive maneuver to preserve slavery from the British Empire's pressures to eventually abolish it,
Mhm.
which is just ahistorical nonsense. Slavery certainly intertwined with the revolution on both sides of it, but to claim that like the colonists were revolting to protect slavery, it's just not doesn't have any basis in fact. And then the second thing she says is that American economic development across the 19th and century is basically fueled by a capitalism that's infused by the cotton industry and slavery. So basically, she says America gets rich and wealthy by exploiting the labor of enslaved persons, which sounds horrific, and it is.
Mhm.
But the evidence behind this just is not there. The empirical data doesn't support this claim, and in fact, it's the free states in the North that the industrial engines, not this stagnant backwater of an economy that existed in the South.
So is your beef then that they sort of just got their facts wrong as an economic historian? You'd be
Yes, and
you'd
that was my original foray into it.
right.
I, you
But
know,
but
I
that but does it go beyond that? Because I mean, what they're also sort of use this to reinterpret the whole meaning of America, if you will. I mean
absolutely,
that's what it
absolutely,
looks like to me. And that 1619, which is the date when the first slaves were
yeah.
brought over, I guess, that is the true founding of our country. And it's just a sort of a very left-wing look at an identity politics way of looking at American history.
That is exactly. It's a modern agenda that's weaponizing the past as part of its narrative. And when they launched, Nicole Hannah-Jones had this banner on her Twitter feed and all her social media that had the year 1776 crossed out, and below it the year 1619, saying that this is America's true founding. And she got in trouble for this claim because this is a really controversial, bold thing. I mean, you're saying we're displacing the Declaration of Independence with the arrival of the first slave ship as the origin point of American history. Never mind that occurs under the British Empire, a previous government that we throw off. But that was a very bold claim, and she got some pushback on it. And then about a year later, the New York Times ghost edited the text of their website and took that claim out of there and pretended that they never made it. They actually got into some trouble internally there because everyone remembered they made this claim. I went and found an old copy and broke the story that they were engaging basically in journalistic malpractice. But there's a recurring theme of that malpractice, both in the use of the past and in some of the shenanigans they've engaged in the way they promoted the 1619 Project, is it's all about a modern day political narrative that aims for income redistribution and slavery reparations and this whole suite of very far left wing policy prescriptions that really aren't justified in any way in the past. They're using the past as saying that like this is owed to us in the present day to correct and make amends for the national sin of slavery.
So it's reparations, as you say, it's redistribution. It's a host of sort of current political ideas. Um, and I'm just curious to the extent that, are those ideas rooted at all in this scholarship as well? In other words, you've got this sort of narrative that, okay, America was founded on the backs of slaves. Is part of that, is there an economic Marxism, I guess, that goes
Yeah,
along with
yeah.
that?
And something that's happening is the 1619 projects evolved because they started with this issue of the New York Times Magazine, then it became a book, then it became a Hulu series. It's become more explicitly Marxist as it's progressed.
Mhm.
And by the time you get to the Hulu series, they have a whole episode on how capitalism is evil. And it's just a stream of these fringe far left Marxist historians railing against exploitation and making these absurd claims like Amazon distribution centers today are supposedly the descendants of the slave plantations, which is patently offensive as a claim to make, but they portray it that way. And there was another part in the 1619 project's text. One of the authors, Matthew Desmond, says Microsoft Excel spreadsheets today are descendants of the accounting books on the plantations. So it's really weaponizing the past, not to really get to the root of what slavery did as this horrific institution. It's really saying slavery is evidence of how we need to discredit capitalism and therefore open the door for the government to manage the economy in this massive redistributive way that looks a lot more like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez than Frederick Douglass is like their vision for America.
So, part of the reason why I think we're all talking about this now is we're coming up on the 250th anniversary.
Exactly.
And I assume that's part of the reason why you wanted to write this book at this time. How should we view slavery, and how should we view its role in American history? Big question.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I guess the third thing is then, so given that, how should we view the 250th anniversary?
Absolutely. So, on the slavery question, it is fundamentally a part of the American story. It's the major political issue between the founding and then eventually the end of the Civil War in 1865. And it has a long tail of repercussions that last through the Civil Rights era. Discrimination, Jim Crow, that whole era grows out of this horrific system. But at the same time, slavery is not the entirety of the American experience. And in fact, what I argue is you look at the founding, 1776, marks a date where the philosophical reconciliation of the principles of liberty collided with the system of slavery that was already in place and caused people to question slavery.
Hmm.
There are multiple examples that come out of the founding era of people that were supportive of the revolution. They said, wait a minute, if we're true to our principles, we must abolish this institution. There's a flurry of founding of abolition societies in the 1780s that come out of Pennsylvania in particular. Almost all of the former northern colonies abolished slavery. Vermont, which enters in as its own state, the first new edition beyond the original 13, writes into its constitution that slavery is not permitted in Vermont. And it's all based out of this philosophical spirit of liberty that came out of the American founding. So that's as much a part of the story as the this barbarous relic of an institution that was carried over. And it's really that debate that's playing out until the Civil War comes to a reckoning on the battlefield that resolves it in the direction of liberty, in the direction of freedom. So telling that story is absolutely important to getting the American founding right, but it's not tearing down the American founding when those philosophical discussions are actually a major impetus and point of ammunition on the abolitionist side. So that's part of how I view this issue as something should be tackled in terms of the American 250th. And then at the same time, just a broader discussion. I want to increase historical literacy of the American 250th because we always hear about civics education lagging behind in the United States. Most people don't even know the basic dates, or let alone what the constitutional system does, is the way that it was set up. And I want that to be a part of our civic education, but to do so in a factually sound and rigorous way. And when the 1619 project goes off the rails, it's because they enlist the past for political purposes in the present, and they let the scholarly rigor slide. They cut corners and make factually erroneous claims, and they do so very unapologetically. They, like the New York Times says, adamantly resisted making necessary corrections to outright false factual claims in there. So that's where I see part of our role in discussing the American 250th is to get the evidence right, to get the facts right, but also engage with serious issues such as slavery in a substantive way.
Yeah, well, great. Well, Phil, thank you so much for coming on the program, and thanks for the book. I highly recommend it to people. It's the 1619 Project Myth. I was in a bookstore just the other day, and the 1619 Project was prominently displayed. I
Right.
hope they put your book right next to it so people can get the other side of this. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm talking to Phil Magness, and that's our program for today. Have a great evening and a great weekend. We'll see you next week.